Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to A Backwards Glance. I'm Sid Mickle, and it's time for a few more stories from my southern upbringing here in Chambers County. Last week, we talked about some activities that went on when I was younger in White Plains at my Uncle Fred's store with my uncle and my grandparents. Today, we are located in the place that I remember living the longest here in Chambers County. It was just past the split of Highway 77 and 431 North, and about 500 yards from Mr. Jack and Miss Sarah Lyle's grocery store, another landmark place in town with two incredibly wonderful people who owned and operated. We had a small rental farm again, 2 or 3 acres, and my parents still worked at the cotton mill. Now, my sisters were gone as they were a little bit older and doing what teenage girls do. So I was left at home alone. Across the street were two older brothers, confirmed bachelors, never married, the Johnson boys. And they lived just across the street from us, and I played there, and they kept an eye on me. Now, in the back of their house, they had a tin garage, and inside it was a pristine Model A. Beautiful car. I have no idea why they kept that thing for so long, but it was their car, and they rode around in it all the time. Well, one day my dad came home with a bird, a crow he had found injured in the woods. He brought it home, and the Johnson boys just happened to have a really gigantic bird cage. My dad put the crow in there to rehabilitate it. I was charged with feeding and watering that crow. Well, I loved that idea, and I became instantly attached to this bird. So, of course, I had to name him. I gave him a very personalized name. He was called Crow. Why, I don't know. That was just where I came down to it. So every day I would go over and I would feed and water Crow, and I would enjoy my time with him. He got more and more animated, making noise and jumping up and down as he recovered. So my dad told me one day, he said, "You've got to start opening that door when you take him outside, because if he needs to fly away, let him go. That's just what nature will do." I didn't like that idea at all, but that's what my dad said to do, and that's what we did. The bird, when I opened that door, would fly around the Johnson boys' backyard, come back, go inside, eat and drink. I would close the door. So one day I get this brilliant idea to take the cage across the street to our backyard. I wanted the bird to fly around and play in my own backyard with me. Terrible mistake. So I take the crow, I set the bird cage on a wooden workbench just outside the back door, open it up, and he flies around for a little while, comes back, lands in the cage. He's jumping around. He looked very animated and concerned. So he steps up on the edge of the little door opening and flies back toward the Johnson boys' house. And I was in shock, like, why don't you stay here? It's a big place. It'll be fun. Well, just about the time the crow was flying across the road, along came one of the state of Alabama's construction vans. On top of those vans, they had these big tubes, and they had doors that swiveled to keep their equipment from sliding out. Well, today, the front door of one of those tubes was open. And as fate would have it, just as Crow went across the road, the van passed by. And Crow flew into the van's open tube and disappeared. He was obviously killed instantly. Big burst of feathers. I stood in my backyard realizing my mistake, realizing this was my fault. And I saw my bird killed, but not only killed, he was gone. The van's doing 50 miles an hour. It's not going to stop. I didn't even have a pet to bury after this horrible situation. All I had was a pile of feathers. Now imagine the work crew when they reached Anniston or wherever they were going and crawled up on top of the van to recover their equipment. Not pleasant at all. Now, another thing that went on there in that place was that we had dogs. We had 23 beagles when I was living there with my parents. My dad was a big rabbit hunter. He and Mr. Ted Talley and I hunted rabbits all over the county. But later on, he decided to downgrade. He became a bird hunter, a quail hunter. And he procured 2 bird dogs. The female dog was a very gentle disposition and a close-in working dog. Her name was Jack. Jack was a good bird dog. Now, Jack, but it was a she. The other dog was named Joe. And Joe was a ranging bird dog. He would go far out and look for birds. And on many occasions, he would be missing for 30 minutes. We would just have to walk around and try to find him. And very often, there's Joe frozen in a point on a covey of birds, waiting on us to finally get there and shoot. They were great dogs, and I enjoyed that part of hunting with them. And I'll tell you a story. I was not a very good shot. I would shoot probably 6 boxes of shells a season to kill 2 birds. I had an old L.C. Smith double barrel, which probably didn't help me very much. Now, my dad shot a Belgian 16 gauge, a Sweet 16 shotgun. On more than one occasions, I have seen him kill 2 birds with 1 shot. First time this happened, I'm with him and I see the 2 birds. He shoots, I miss everything. 2 birds fell. I couldn't believe it. I walk out and I pick up the birds and I turned him and I said, "How did you do that? What just happened?" Now, my dad just looked at me and he said, just very straightforwardly, "All you have to do is wait for the birds to cross and shoot 1 time." I think he was serious. I really do. Now, maybe he wasn't. I was pretty gullible, but he convinced me that day that all he had to do was catch the birds crossing and he'd kill 2 at a time. That was my experience bird hunting with my father. He was quite the shot and very successful, and I just got a lot of exercise. Now, one other thing happened on this farm, and I want to ask you a question. Have you ever had a situation when you were younger that really traumatized you? Maybe with a piece of machinery, a vehicle, or a piece of equipment. Something went wrong that just stuck with you and really, really scared you. Well, here's what happened with me. The train ran behind the house, and the train had a name, Johnny Ray, because an engineer who worked there forever, his name was Johnny Ray. Thus, the train had a name. Now, it ran the entire length of our back fence down in a cut to get the grade right. I would stand on that little rise and wave to the engineer every day in the summer. Well, one day a strange thing happened. Along came the train, a work train, and they cut the ditches with this piece of equipment. Perfectly square cuts, probably 2.5 feet deep, 3 feet across. It was beautiful. I would go down and walk up and down those ditches, and I just couldn't figure out how it could be cut so perfectly. A couple of days later, another work train came along, and they dumped off these big bundles of cross ties, fresh, soaked in creosote, I'm assuming, cross ties. Well, one bundle fell and it burst and it just covered. They just laid out like the roof of a building. I decided it would make a perfect fort. So I would go down there and play in the sun, in the heat, dripping with the smell of creosote and all the other nasty things. Then one day I figured out that it would be a great adventure if I would go down to my railroad fort when the train came by. I wasn't thinking very clearly that day, but I did. I heard the train whistle at the crossing above us. I ran through the pastures, got underneath those cross ties. I could just see out as the train approached. And I'm telling you, the boxcars were doing this. They were flopping from side to side. As a matter of fact, one day I saw a piece of pulpwood thrown off the train. A 5-foot long, probably piece of pulpwood stick just thrown off. If somebody had been standing there, it would have killed him as dead as Abe Lincoln. I mean, it was just a crazy thing to see. But as that train got closer to me, it was really loud and it was huge, a gigantic, loud, thunderous piece of machinery as the engine got closer. I'm underneath the fort. I'm probably 5 feet, 4 feet away from the wheels. Sparks flying off those wheels, the screeching, grinding, unbelievable noise of a train engine just in front of my face. I was scared to death. I was literally frozen. So the train goes by and I'm thinking, okay, go, go, go. A strange thing happened. The train stopped. I was stuck. They uncoupled to work boxcars at the mill just down the street, just down the track. I was there for 30 minutes while that train worked those cars and re-hooked up and drove away. I was afraid to get out of there. I was afraid the man in the caboose would see me and I'd be in big trouble. Well, I waited, and finally the train moved away. I jumped up. I ran back to my house, soaked to the skin in sweat and fear, totally traumatized by that crazy experience and bad decision. And no, I never told my parents. My mother would have killed me had she known I'd done that. Very bad choice. Now, there was one other thing about that location I want to tell you about today. Just up the street from us was a place. It was called the TB Hospital. It was a tuberculosis sanatorium where patients recovered. I could go down the street, cut up the driveway behind the hospital, get to another road to go to my grandparents' house. And my parents allowed this. It was just a few yards on the main road, then back roads to their house. Every day I went there, I would ride my bike to the TB hospital driveway, push it up that incline road, and stop. And the reason I stopped was I had to think about going through that property, that close to the very back door of the TB hospital. Well, I made up my mind I was not going to catch tuberculosis by riding through their property. I would take multiple deep breaths, jump on my bike, and ride a good 200 or 300 yards behind that hospital, ready to pass out from holding my breath. And I would get most of the way through and I would just have to breathe. And as I got to my grandparents' road, I hoped and prayed I hadn't caught tuberculosis. Now, after doing this for weeks and weeks, one day I told my Uncle Larry about my fear. When he picked himself up off the ground from laughing hysterically, he reassured me I was not going to catch tuberculosis by riding down their driveway. The things young minds come up with. It was really one of those very, very strange thoughts. Now, later on, we're going to talk about two of those people I mentioned earlier, the Lyles family who ran Lyles Grocery Store. They were spectacular. I want to tell you about some of the wonderful things that happened with them when I was a kid growing up in my family. Other things we're going to talk about are another location I spent a lot of time at. When I was younger, I spent time with Mr. Pug Jones at his body and fender shop, watching him repair cars. Now, actually, most of the time, I watched him smoke cigars and talk to people who stopped in. He didn't seem to do an awful lot of work, and it was fine with me. Just the sight of the wrecked cars and him working on them, partially disassembled, was just intriguing to me. I wanted to be like him. Now, later on, I started dating his daughter in high school, and a strange thing happened. He refused basically to talk to me. He acted like I was a total stranger. And I had a hard time figuring that out. I was still the same reasonably good kid that spent time with him. The other thing that I'll tell you about is Mr. Bill Owens' fuel tank yard. He had this truck that he delivered Sinclair gasoline. He was the driver, the delivery driver. And one day, my Uncle Larry and I were cutting the grass at this tank yard, a storage yard. And Mr. Bill Owens told us a secret. He told us about a special faucet or hydrant in the yard. But that's a story for another day. We'll share that later on. I hope some of these crazy stories from my days growing up, as bewildered as I seemed to be in those days, are entertaining to you. Hopefully you didn't have stories that were more traumatic than the one I just told about the train. Over the next few weeks, we're going to tell some more stories about that location and others as we delve into some nostalgic views about growing up country here in the small city of Lafayette and adventures all across Chambers County. So until we get back together again, take care. Hopefully we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.